Is my mic on? Okay, great. Thank you so much for that warm welcome, and thank you to the Positive Aging Consortium overall for having me today. I am delighted to have the opportunity to talk with you all and also to have a conversation with Paula Daigle from Age Well Middle Tennessee. And I am thrilled to have a chance to talk about this topic in particular, how mindsets on aging are changing. I'm here from the Frameworks Institute, which Deborah just introduced, so I won't say too much about. But we are a nonprofit that helps other nonprofits achieve their mission through the power of having better conversations, knowing what to say and what to leave unsaid. We're a group of social scientists that work on different aspects of those communication initiatives and challenges. And we all bring together the science of framing, which is, simply put, choices in how we present ideas that lead to other changes, measurable changes, big differences in how people think, feel, and act on an issue. So where we start, what we emphasize, how we explain it, and often what we leave unsaid. So let me give you a couple of examples of what that means from experiments that we have done at Frameworks. Recently, we did a study that investigated how images of older people affect attitudes and perceptions. And in this study, we were testing lots of different types of images, different family structures, different professional settings, how people interact with technology. But one category was with the testing images with the goal of finding ways to show older people who use supports like canes or wheelchairs to move around. And we wanted to make sure that we could show authentically, a challenge that many people live with every day, but yet positively. And so one set of images we tested showed people that with mobility challenges who are really disengaged from their surroundings. So you can see the gentleman here, his friends or family are having a lively conversation and he is excluded and off to the side. This sort of image increased negative attitudes. People would say much more negative things about what it means to get older, and increased their sense of paternalism, meaning the sense that we as younger people know what's best for older people, and we need to kind of pat them on the head and make sure they're okay, but dismiss them, right? Overall, we know best. And I see a couple of nodding heads and laughter, so we know that is something that's quite common, right? That kind of attitude is quite common in our communities and in our world. But it doesn't, just because it's common doesn't mean it has to be what we expect, and it doesn't have to be what we get. So we tested another set of images, still showing limited mobility, but really showing the picture of that person being engaged, right? Facing the others around them, smiling, clearly, part of the conversation. And when people saw this image and we asked them what they thought, they talked about more positive aspects of aging. They didn't say so much about how awful it is to kind of lose different bodily functions. Instead, they talked more about, even if, right, you start to have trouble moving around, that doesn't mean, that your life has suddenly, shrunk. And they didn't talk about those same kind of paternalistic attitudes. They were talking more about like, well, I can't see as well, I've got glasses, and if I can't move as well, I've got a cane. It wasn't the kind of overarching frame. So we can see, right, a simple shift, right, moving the person from here to here leads to a bigger shift, right, in the attitudes and perceptions that people have. Another example, we were asked to come up with a set of experiments to test overall people's what ways of framing things would shift attitudes towards aging in a more positive direction, and support policies that change our community so we can all stay included and participate as we get older. And so we were going to run a survey, but before we could even get to the survey, we had to figure out what words to use to describe people in later life. And so we set up an experiment where we gave people one of 5 terms for people in later life: older person, older adult, senior citizen, and elderly. And we asked them to rate them on a 5-point scale on a measure of competence, right? What can people do? How fully can they kind of run their own lives? And so what we found was this. that the words senior, elderly, and senior citizen, people associated with incompetence. They would say words like frail, or frail came up a lot, and really that was the main word that came up with it. Older person and older adult, people associated with other words like independent or wise. So that seemed interesting. We should use the word older adult more often. But we asked a second question, which is, how old do you think these people are? And the results that we found was really interesting. Responses from all participants were averaged, and the mean ages were as follows. So the senior, elderly, senior citizen-ish words, that was 68, 69. Older person, 64. Older adult, the average was 54. And that was because the range was crazy big. So that people were saying as low as 30. That wasn't, everyone didn't say that, but it was a theme. And the responses with the logic being, well, if younger adults are in their 20s, older adults are in their 30s. So this suggests, that at that time, older adult was the main current preferred term in, progressive, like, aging advocacy, and it's great. It doesn't have negative connotations with it, but it did show, our research showed that when people hear that, they bring to mind somebody quite younger than the work that those organizations are often looking to do, serve people in their 60s, 70s, 80s. So the term older adult calls to someone in their mind mid-50s. And so our resulting recommendation is to use the term older person, older people. You can talk about older Tennesseans, older Americans, all of that is fine. But it cues both over age 60 and competent, right, deserving of a full and life that they run for themselves, not paternalistic. So these are just a couple of examples, again, of what I mean by framing. And they're not all this simple, right? Just move the chair here, right? Or change the words you use. It's a lot more that we're up against. But I wanted to give you an example of what I mean by the term. And so overall, I'm going to talk at the end about how we have seen attitudes towards aging shift in the time we've been doing this work, since about 2014. But I'm going to talk about how the story where we started with, which is still very much alive in some places, how we can change the story we tell about what it means to live well across the age span, and then ways that we have seen other people start to share this new story and ways you can do that as well. So on the first one, knowing the story you're in, we came to this work, again, we're a nonprofit. I was just hanging out in my office one day and someone called up and said, I'm working on, I want to change the public perceptions about aging. And she was representing a group of organizations. So you can see her AARP, American Federation for Aging Research, American Geriatric Society, Gerontological Society, so on and so forth. And all of these agencies serve slightly different purposes. They each have a different corner of the field, right, of working on behalf and with older people. But they came together and they realized that they all faced a shared challenge, which was ageism. So whether that was people throwing away the AARP mailer because they're like, that's for old people, I don't want that membership, or whether it was a more structural issue, like too few healthcare providers seeking to specialize in geriatrics because they found it a depressing specialty, right? No matter what they were doing, what kind of the work they were doing, they realized that negative perceptions of aging was really hampering and limiting the effect that they could have. So they commissioned us to conduct a series of studies that could land on a new story we could tell. What is it we can say to Americans to have them understand more accurately, more authentically, and more positively what it means for our society, for people in our society to be living longer lives? So overall, this study involved over 12,000 Americans, and we've just done some follow-on studies, so I think it's probably more like 14,000 people in this study as well. And we analyzed many hundreds of pieces of media coverage and advocacy materials. And so here's the story that we saw out there in the world and in people's minds. The first finding was that in media, we found kind of two stories. One was super idealized, the Golden Girls being, the prototypical image, and there are other shows that do that kind of work as well. But a very idealized image, lots of pictures of people in later life doing amazing feats, physical feats, boxing, summiting a mountain, skiing in a wheelchair, all kinds of like really challenging physical stuff. And then another story where basically everyone had their hands in their heads. Every picture was like this, often in black and white with like really dark shading, Problems, the story that there's just, later life is a series of one problem after another, sad and bad for the people experiencing them, but not a lot we can do as a society to either prevent later life from being a particularly challenging time, or to address it, right, at scale as those challenges arise. So one story is like, nothing to see here, it's all gonna be great, and the other was, whew, it's gonna be really depressing. So two very starkly different stories in media, entertainment media, news media, et cetera. When we looked at what nonprofits and advocates and other kinds of academics, other public voices were saying, so not the media, but other voices in the public square, what were they saying? We found that they weren't talking much about, they were talking a lot about aging, but they weren't talking much about what we do as a society that can support healthy aging, how we might need to rearrange ourselves a little differently in terms of transportation, workplace policies, community design, institutional design. Does it have to be a senior center here and a kids center there? Can we have a community center, right? So different changes that we could make. They weren't talking about those social supports. So you would see a lot of outreach directly to people in later life saying, here's what you can do to take control of your financial future. So a lot of advice. But not a lot of stories between showing the relationship between successful aging and the systems and structures that surround us. Am I still sounding okay? It seems like I just got an echo. It's okay? Okay, great, thanks. The other thing is that when people did talk about policies or structural or bigger picture stories about aging, they often talked about it as a crisis. So the idea that younger workers were going to, a shrinking number of younger workers needed to hold up the burden of an aging population using up all the Medicare and all the Social Security and all the this and that. A lot of language around demographic shifts, the fact that America is getting older, meaning there are more older people than younger people proportionally than there once were, talking about that as the silver tsunami, coming to kind of crush our systems and our society. So, a burden and a natural disaster, right, was kind of how that we were, most of the policy discussion about aging was going. And this is, not, it is what it is. It was quite negative. People often were doing that with the very best of intentions, trying to kind of sound the alarm bell that we need to make some changes to deal with this. But we would see, just stark statistic after statistic. Here's an infographic talking about rising. You don't need to see all these numbers. I just want to have you a sense of how many bad numbers there were, right? Whether it's healthcare costs, housing burden, lack of workers, right? Bad. And this, unfortunately, just kind of piling on the stark statistics. When we feed people stark statistics, they may agree that something is a little off, but we rarely bring them to the table and spark an appetite for doing something. Instead, people feel overwhelmed or cocoon, right? The sense that, okay, I'm gonna get my retirement and my mom's retirement situation straight, but we don't have a civic conversation that's saying, let's really change the way we can run things so that it works better for everyone. All right, that was a lot. I'm going to sum that up with a really fun, a video that is interesting, I won't call it fun, of snippets of interviews that we did across the nation, asking people kind of, what do you think about later life? What does it mean to get older? That sort of thing. And this has been edited to have little themes, but it does reflect the larger data set that we did, hundreds of interviews, longer interviews. So I just want you to watch this and listen for the patterns, right? The assumptions that people have, and maybe I'll ask you to share with a neighbor what you notice after this. So it's like a minute and a half long. Everyone ready? All right.
Unfortunately, as we get older, we start to see our bodies falling apart on us.
They can't do everything by themselves anymore.
You know, walking with canes.
They start becoming a little more feeble.
More health problems like strokes, cancer.
More medication, more doctor visits.
Would you say there are advantages to being older?
You get to relax more. Yeah.
Retirement?
'Cause that's when work comes to an end.
Can you think of any advantages to getting older in America?
Not really.
Probably it would be hard for them to adapt to this newer world or new technology and things like that.
Technology-wise, I'm sure it's harder.
Doors seem to be closing a bit as far as opportunities.
I guess as you get older, they want someone who's going to be more vibrant, going to be around, maybe be able to do the work quicker, faster, better.
Seems like the older I get, the less places that they want me to work.
They're alone. Their spouses die.
There's, of course, a lot of folks who are just old and lonely.
All right, so I'm just asking you to turn to a neighbor and just say, what you noticed in that video? What'd you hear? Yeah. All right. I hate to interrupt anyone, especially in the South where you all have such good manners, but please let me bring your conversation to an end. I'll tell you what I heard there. First is the assumption that aging is always and only a period of decline and deterioration. The second was super happy. It's a period of earned leisure. You know, you're just cruising with all your grandkids constantly around the world. You know, what even do you do? And then a third is this sense that aging, that older people are over there, right? They're less competent, so they're excluded at work. They're left behind because they apparently can't use a cell phone, which is a sad commentary, I think a sadder commentary on society than the imagined older people here. They're left alone, right, as their friends and family pass on. And they're largely invisible, right? Another piece we saw in these videos that we were like, you know, what do you think about older people? You're like, I don't know. I don't think about older people very much. Even people who you can see, you know, others might characterize as older people. So overall, it's a state that's negative, where society no longer expects you to contribute because they aren't sure you can. And so why does this matter, even to all of us, even if it doesn't affect us personally? Of course, we can see how it does affect us personally, but thinking in a bigger picture, if people equate aging with a process of decline, one, they are less likely to identify themselves as aging. I don't want that, you know. Two, they're less likely to support good aging policy, again, because I don't want to think about it. And they are less likely to connect aging to other social issues that they actually care about quite a bit, whether that's women's rights and space in the workplace, whether that is fair employment or access to good health care, whether it's community safety and community cohesion. People value those things, but they don't think about older people in the picture because they're invisible and seen as over there. So this is the story, right, that we saw that people had. There's more to this research. If you want to access it, you can. But with that, we realize that these are real problems that we have to shift if we're going to create a society that works for all of us as we age. And so to change the story we tell, that was the second part of our project, was to figure out what is it that we can say differently to make society go differently. The stories we tell are dress rehearsals for the policies and programs our society will ultimately adopt. And so the first thing we did was we thought about ways to move away from the issue, the idea that older is other, right? That we are not old and they are old and never the twain shall meet, and instead more to a story that we are all aging, right? And this affects us all, and every generation has some interdependences. And so one thing we did was we found that we really looked at how much we use in writing, even people who are running Meals on Wheels or committing their lives, right, to providing services for people in later life, and don't consciously hold ageist attitudes. The language was so othering. The aging population was often talked about them and they, right? It's other people, not us, not whoever was the voice of the piece. Lots of language, elderly, seniors, and senior citizen, which again wasn't being used in a necessarily mean way, right? There was no malice or ill intent in using it, but we know that language, with the research, we see that it calls up the ideas of technologically incapable, frail, and in a process of decline. So much of our language was about helping and assisting vulnerable seniors. Very little was about tapping into experiences and insights that folks had, right? There was always this positioning of a younger society fixing or helping or supporting, right, folks who have this burden of many years. And the language of burden and fighting, right? It was always about we need to fight aging, we need to deal with the burdens of aging, the heavy weights of aging, always seen as this negative thing. So the first thing we did was we just really have been organizing, right? All the NGOs, lots of places like this. I've been in a similar consortium in Maine with the university there and New Hampshire and lots of places to start this kind of conversation so that those of us that really are trying to resist ageism aren't inadvertently reinforcing it through this othering language. Another change was to take the password to our Twitter feed away from Chicken Little, to really stop telling such a crisis story and saying the sky is falling because, oh my God, we haven't shored up Social Security, we haven't expanded Medicare or fostered it in the way we need to. Instead of talking about the sky is falling, social science actually suggests that it's a more effective choice to pull forward the story of the little engine that could, that old story in which a task that others thought to be too difficult in the end was addressed by several leaders coming together to get it done. People give the engine all the credit, but do you remember the clown? The clown was rallying all the toys to really pull in community support. So it's a very kind of yes we can together kind of story. So really moving from a story of crisis to possibility. And one of the ways we accomplished that, we tested several different messages and ways of talking about it, and we found that this one was really helpful, this idea of ingenuity, or good old American can do, to talk about how Americans are problem solvers. When we see an opportunity, we figure out how to seize it, and when we see that something isn't working, we rethink our approach. Connect this to aging by saying something like, as we age, our interests and needs change, and smart communities across the nation are figuring out how to adapt our neighborhood designs and other systems so they work for us all across the lifespan. And you can see here that us and we language is very present here as well. It's not, oh, make a nice spot over there for them. It's that we all need this, and as we age, right, we should be thinking about this. Here's another example of what that might look like in this kind of NGO or in advocacy language that has changed the way we talk about it as we go about our work. So here on the left, this is my title for this. This is taken from a description, right, of a home-delivered meal program. So seniors receiving home-delivered meals are often isolated from community institutions, friendships, and family relationships. As our aging population and their healthcare burden increases, we need visiting programs that reduce the social isolation of the elderly and permit senior citizens to stay in the community. So this is a bad example. That permit really got my goat. So I was like, all right, we're going to reframe that one. But you can see here that the older people are only described as like stuck in their house, nobody's there, and if we don't pay a government worker to come visit them, right, they're going to be all alone. And of course, social isolation is a key issue, and those programs are essential. I'm not trying to take anything away from them or suggest we don't need them. I am suggesting that if we keep talking about them like this, they will continue to be seen as less important, less essential, and really something for a few do-gooders to give to the needy. It's very much a charity story and not a story of justice and fairness and how we need to set up society. So we can talk about different ways. So we can really focus on, instead of talking about services to help them, we can talk more about a society that includes us. With Americans living longer, healthier lives, we need innovative approaches to ensure that we can stay connected to friends, family, and community as we age. It's time to rethink the design of places where we live, work, and play throughout our lives. We need to update communities so they work for a society where more of us are older. And with that kind of frame, you're really emphasizing, again, that this is all, we all have a stake in this. It's not just some nice people helping some old people. So the other framing element that we found, oops, no, I don't want to do that yet. Back up. Talk about can't use a cell phone, I can't use a clicker. Okay, all right. So as we get this, we worked on a metaphor that really was designed to help people understand that there may be physical changes that happen with life, with longer life, but there's psychosocial changes that happen that's actually a period of growth, right? It's not only and always a period of physical deterioration and decline. It is ideally and often and usually a period of social emotional growth, right? A sense of confidence, a sense of understanding your place in the world and what you contribute, a sense of peace and well-being, right? Kind of like, hey, here I am, I'm at this point in my life, I've got it all together, right? Kind of feeling, right? Not it's falling all apart kind of feeling. And so this metaphor that we developed really, I think, helped capture that, helped people focus people on that, and I'll show you some great examples of how powerful this simple metaphor can be. So the metaphor is one of momentum, that as we get older, we gather momentum with the accumulation or the buildup of experience and insights, powering us up to take new ideas and achieve our goals. And across society, the momentum of people in later life helps to power our communities and move our communities forward. So that's a very different kind of description of what it means, right, to age. And as we tested this, I'm going to show you some of the data that shows the power of this metaphor. So one is we tested it against in a survey that showed people's supports on their feelings on different attitudes and policy preferences related to aging. So in this graph that I'm about to show you, up is good, they're more positive, more supportive, and down is bad or negative movement. So we saw that with this metaphor, we got people to be, does this have a little, it doesn't have a thingy on it. Increase the positive attitude towards aging, decrease negative attitudes towards aging, really move people away from us versus them thinking, right? The sense that olders are over there and while society is happening over here. And built a sense of efficacy, which is a social science term for a sense of can do. Like if we did something, it would actually make a difference. So in the surveys, that was quite positive. We ran another type of test, which is known as the implicit association test. This is a common social, kind of innovative. It's been around, 20 years now, which I think still counts as innovative in academia. And it measures people's implicit attitudes. It was developed really to show on the topic of race. And so it was studied, if you show pictures of brown or black people, people are largely more likely to associate those with negative terms. You show pictures of white people, they're more likely to associate them with positive terms and positive traits. So it's a way of getting at thoughts and feelings about social categories that can fall out of a person's conscious awareness. And social psychologists believe that these unconscious beliefs shape the way we think and the way we act. And so they figured out different ways of measuring them. And it's tricky, like if people aren't aware of their own biases, how can you measure them? And this kind of task helps with that. So people are asked to quickly sort words or images. And so in this one, they were asked, we just used people's eyes so that they weren't being shaped by age we wanted them to see age. So we showed, eyes with wrinkles at the corner sort of thing. But they weren't being characterized by gender or influenced by gender, race, or just kind of their sense of the general attractiveness of the person. You could see younger and older eyes. And then they had to assign pictures of the older adults with good words and the younger adults with bad words to the right. And the time it takes to associate a stigmatized group with positive evaluations, like it takes you a minute. Your brain takes a second to say, no, I'm supposed to move that to this side. That length of time is a way of measuring the unconscious bias. This is because it takes conscious effort to overcome the unconscious association effort that takes time. And so this method has been used, across the field for different, implicit bias exists, and it works differently from explicit attitudes that we can actually state that we have. And so we wondered, can we use this to reduce implicit bias about older adults? And so psychologists on our staff designed a first of its kind experiment to see this. We had 900 participants randomly assigned to read different ways of talking about aging. One of them was building momentum that I just showed you. Another was talking about intergenerational community centers, so not only having a senior center and then a playground, but kind of integrating those things together. We explained what implicit bias meant, and we had another anti-ageist kind of narrative. And then we had a control group that got no frame. So after being primed with one of these frames, participants completed one of these implicit association tests, and then we looked to see if there were any significant differences in implicit unconscious bias between the treatment groups, and we compared them with that control group. And so here's what we found is that just an exposure to that metaphor led to a 30% reduction in people's implicit bias. So the control, you can say this, I guess one way of saying this is people are about 60% biased, right, on a general day towards older people, and this moved it down to 45% kind of sort of thing. So it was a real significant reduction. And let me show you that on video. So same kind of method, short interviews on the street. We shared this idea, shared this momentum metaphor with folks, and then listen to how different this is from the videos you saw earlier.
What do you take away from that way of thinking about getting older?
I mean, if you're thinking about, the older generation gaining momentum, usually momentum equals picking up speed, that kind of thing, which is a whole different way to look at getting older.
I guess, the energy just generates, like you were saying.
It's a beautiful thing. You make me feel like, it's a beautiful thing to get older.
You now have the freedoms to go out and do some of the things that you've always wanted.
I feel like the momentum is just going to keep gaining speed because now they have more time to spend.
Thinking about sort of in the U.S. right now, what do you think we need to do to make more space for the dynamic change that people experience as they get older?
Well, make it a little easier for them to find jobs.
Here's things you're qualified for.
Have really good sharpened skills that they've always had.
Yeah. Here's this, and this. These are other things you can do.
Because ideas can come to anybody.
I think about all the writers who didn't write for 60 years, and then suddenly at age 60, they finally have time and enough energy and ability to process their whole life.
What do you think getting older means for society as a whole?
You need to collaborate with other really hardworking people.
If we had some more community programs that young people interacting with older people.
I guess that's kind of exciting in a sense that there is this everybody kind of has their part as far as contributing to this energy of building and this momentum that's happening. So I guess for me, it's kind of an exciting way to look at it.
So much more positive, much more understanding, right, that at every age we have strengths, gifts, and talents, right, that we can contribute to society. So that's changing the story. We've been working with different nonprofits, research institutions to get that word out there. And so I'm going to show you some of the ways that this new story has created change, and then I'm going to talk with Paula about how that's happening here in Middle Tennessee. So one of the first things that we were really proud of, we were thrilled when in 2018, the American Geriatric Society broke new ground with a style guide. They changed their style guide for their journal that asked authors of medical studies to use more inclusive, more respectful language to describe people in later life. So the idea was that we needed to move away from words like senior citizen, or elderly, and towards older people or older adults aged 60 to 75, whatever was the age category, right, that the study was referring to. And this has since had a ripple effect throughout publication, shaping the style guides for major major media and new media outlets, from the New York Times to BuzzFeed and Google. And you can see that that's showing up in more local publications. Here's an example from the Kansas City Star and how they're changing their expectations. AARP was a partner in this work, and I remember when we published the very first study, and before we published it, we gave it to, you know, kind of the set of funders to read and the folks, and the pictures on the front, they were like, these, like, you're talking about ageism, but these pictures are ageist. And we're like, they're the only pictures out there, right? So we ended up changing the style of the report, but that led to a conversation like, well, why are only all the photos out there ageist? And so AARP and Getty Images launched a Disrupt Aging collection, where that's the Getty Images is a place where a lot of folks that are creating publications, they'll go and get stock photos from them. And so this is showing older folks actively participating in the community, range of body types, range of family structures, very diverse in terms of younger olders or older olders, and what folks are doing and what kinds of participations how they're participating in society. So this has been accessed millions of times since, and has had a real effect on the photos that are even available to make something like this, right? Like the stock photos that you find. CVS has made a pledge. This was in, I think, 2018 they did it, or the pledge was a little sooner than that, but they started phasing in a new system in April 2018, pledging that they would not use any advertising in their stores or any of their stuff that had used airbrushing to remove wrinkles or other signs of aging. And they asked all of the brands it sells in stores, L'Oreal, Maybelline, Coty, whoever, to do the same. Or if they were using retouched images, they had to label it and clearly and visible as modified. And the company has created what it's calling a beauty mark. Catchy, right? That looks like a heart within a broken circle, and it will be applied to all images to signal truth in advertising. So if it is airbrushed, they have to put this little sticker on it saying airbrushed, right? And they started phasing in the new system in April 2018, and I'm pretty sure it's now active in a store near you. I saw a mark on a skin cream bottle just last week while shopping. And Allure magazine, major beauty magazine, had a major op-ed. Other beauty magazines have since followed suit. They will no longer use the term anti-aging because it signals that aging is something to fight, like antifungal cream. And again, in one of those early conversations with the leaders of aging organizations, I was like, what would you want to see? What would success look like? They're like, I don't want to see anti-aging creams at the drugstore anymore. I was like, all right, we pulled it off. We're working on it at least. Still got Walgreens to go. In Boston, the city of Boston, lots happening at the local level too. The city of Boston, like many other major metropolitan areas, has a shuttle bus reserved for older people, and theirs used to be called the Senior Shuttle. Today, it's got a new way of framing itself. It is transporting Boston's most experienced people. They also, I love that, right? They renamed their Council on Aging Services to Age Strong Commission, and they talk about their campaign as age with the plus sign, which is like A+, right? But also literally positive, right? So subtle cues there, and I think Paula will have more to say about this in just a moment. And then a group called Changing the Narrative Colorado went through a Train the Trainers initiative with us and has been doing all kinds of amazing things across Colorado. One of my favorites is that they hosted a contest for local artists to create and submit anti-ageist birthday cards. If you go through, we handled the beauty aisle at CVS, but the greeting card aisle, the birthday card aisle, we've got some work to do. So many of the birthday cards are, again, emphasizing that idea that aging is only and always a process of physical decline and deterioration. And lots of stereotypes about older people as grumpy, technologically incapable, etc. And so this anti-ageist birthday cards have been really beautiful. I'm going to show you a few. So this is the front of one. It's been a beautiful life, still is. Here's to making it full of love and memories. Happy birthday. And on the back of the card shows the artist and why they wanted to create this card. This particular one was created by an artist named Emily Anderson. This card gave me the chance to rewrite the narrative on ageism and express growing older in a positive way. There are others that really tap into a theme of wisdom. Colorado, like many of our communities, has a significant indigenous population as well as a proud Native tradition. So the one on the left there really draws on that cultural imagery. This other one is a mosaic or a collage. Walking through the garden of life brings wisdom. These two tap into, they just kind of make me happy, these two. A mighty oak tree, all right, talking about really the depth, right, and the many years it takes to become a mighty oak tree. And this one, a wild and wildly happy, reframed version of the outdated stereotype of the old crone, right? The hair is freedom, right? And she's really kind of in tune with nature. And this kind of, these do make me feel good, and I'm glad these things are out there, and you can buy these birthday cards on their website. This matters, again, because the stories we tell are the dress rehearsals for the policies our society will ultimately endorse. And we have seen, through the advocacy of our partners and through this shifting mindset overall, really good policies in place. Even in this era of really trying to, particularly in the last administration, really trying to shrink expenditures, congressional committees were preserving aging services for 2019. In the most recent reauthorization of the Older Americans Act, which is legislation that's been in place since the 60s and gets reauthorized every 5 years or so, was really seen as a groundbreaking approach. It really focused on the challenge of social isolation, which is a different mindset around what the problem of aging is. It's not always and only physical deterioration, right? It's the fact that we are cutting people off from community, and that itself is going to change what happens in aging services, for the foreseeable future. It also really took an intentional look at within groups of older people, who are the groups within that group that tend to be less represented and even more isolated. So LGBT plus elders of color, looking at that and how that could really be treated differently and intentionally. In my own life, hearing this story and doing this work has changed, I think, the way I think about getting older. I just went to my 25th college reunion, and everyone was kvetching about this falling apart and that not working. And I said, listen, we are not falling apart. Our bodies have finally gotten to a point where they are going to speak up and correct us when we abuse them, okay? And they have figured that out. And so we have to take care of them. And I bought my first home just 4 or 5 years ago, and I was looking for an intentional community and found an intentional community that had been founded by folks who were about my age, mid-40s, but 20 years ago, and so now they're in their mid-60s. About half of the units in this condo are owned by the original people who founded, and about half of them we've bought in. And so it's a multi-generational community, and every day there's the systems and the structures, the parties, all this stuff that make this little oasis of a community in the middle of Washington, D.C. work. I realize these folks have been doing this for 22 years now, and it's really been wonderful for my 10-year-old daughter to be able to run throughout this. I could just tell her to go outside, which doesn't happen in Washington, D.C., and she's got real authentic relationship with these folks who are, my parents' age or older. And I think I would have been more hesitant to buy in had I not done this work. So I think about that as the great thing about getting older is that you don't lose all the other ages you've been, right? The experiences, the times that folks have lived, has been part of my daily life since joining this project. But I want to end on this point, which is that we need change in society to better include older folks, but we can't do that through revolution or reformation, according to this philosopher. None of that can ultimately change society. Rather, you must tell a more powerful tale, one so persuasive that it sweeps away the old myths and becomes the preferred story, one so inclusive that it gathers all the bits of our past and present into a coherent whole, one that even shines some light onto our future so that we can take the next step if you want to change society, then you have to tell an alternative story. I think that this research has uncovered an alternative story. The research exists because people working in the aging field knew we needed a different story, and they have taken that story and really moved it into a field that's creating change as small as a birthday card and as big as reauthorizing, right, the major legislation that shapes policy in later life. And so I hope you can join us in telling this story on the Gerontological Society of America's webpage. There's the Reframing Aging Initiative. If you even just Google Reframing Aging Initiative, I'm pretty sure it's the first one that comes up. We have resources on, you can connect to them through that website, but online courses that teach you how to speak this new language, or things that you can give out to a discussion group and start a good discussion. But overall, I just want to invite you to help tell this new story because it makes a big difference. And thank you again for allowing, for listening to all this great work, and also for the work that you are doing in community, all that momentum that you are gathering and using to power things up. Thank you. So tell me everything. Tell us everything. How have you thought about reframing aging here in Middle Tennessee?
Well, some of you may know us. We're now Age Well Middle Tennessee, but we were the Council on Aging. So you may have heard of us. I've been out, my coworkers and I, to the St. Clair Senior Center several times, but we were the Council on Aging. And we started noticing in our community a lot of the stuff that Julie was saying, that older adults were like being put in the corner almost and were not valued. And we knew through our work that was like, wait, we know some outstanding older adults who are still very active in our community. They're on our board, they're volunteering in our schools, they're leading initiatives for affordable housing in Nashville, taking the charge. So we felt like we needed to set the tone and the example for the change in the way our Nashville community and Middle Tennessee area look at aging.
Wow. And so how did you do that?
It was a lot of work, a lot of focus groups with older adults, with professionals. What name should we be? What name should we be? How do we promote aging and positively in our community? And we had lots of crazy names that came up, and we were like, no, 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 no. But we thought aging well was the perfect one, because no matter what age we are, we all want to age well. Even if you're a young baby, you're aging every month. We mark those milestones with such joy when our babies grow or our children grow. My youngest child just graduated high school. That was a great momentum in his life, and we mark those. But as we get older, we tended to look at aging as negatively. Oh no, I'm a year older. We would go and speak to health fairs at businesses, and all of them would poke each other and go, aging, that's for you, but they'd never stop at our table to talk to us because they think it was for everybody else, not for them. So we really wanted to come up with a name that promoted what we wanted to do as individuals, on our staff, on our board, our community partners. We work with a lot of other nonprofits, government agencies, friends in the community who care about older adults or older people. And I've learned a lot today about older adults. So we kind of settled on aging well, because that's what all of us hope to do in different phases. As we go through life, we want to age well.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Do you feel like it's made a difference in the way people respond?
I think it has. Yeah. Unfortunately, due to the pandemic, this is kind of some of our first outings out into the public. But we've really noticed a lot of people want to work alongside us to change that perception, to encourage people to promote positive aging, to look at the value in older adults. So I think it's been a very positive thing for us. Based on your conversation, I think all of us have a lot of work still to do in Middle Tennessee. I think there's a lot in our community still that negative perception. Yeah. And we are really working with a lot of our community partners for the intergenerational. Let's get the younger folks in with the older folks. Let's get the middle-aged people in with why are we segregating our older adults? So I feel like there's a lot of work left to be done. So I was really excited to be here and to hear you speak today.
Do you talk explicitly about ageism, like let's confront and defeat ageism, or do you feel like you're taking more of a lead by example approach, or do you mix it up depending on what you're doing?
We are trying to mix it up because I feel like in Middle Tennessee, we are still trying to establish the value of older adults to our community. and the lack of services and the opportunities for older adults to age well. So I think we're doing a little bit of both. It's taking us a little bit. It's been a kind of an uphill battle, but we're determined through our example and through our partner agencies. And we're based in Nashville, but we work throughout the 13 counties of kind of northern Middle Tennessee, and trying to really encourage our community partners as well to take on this initiative to promote aging, and we're all very committed to working together.
Yeah. Do any examples, like, I had the birthday cards and the Boston bus, and it's not fair. I've got a whole staff collecting this stuff from across the nation. But do you do any initiatives or really cool or unusual things that have helped paint older adults in later life come to mind?
No, I love the Boston bus.
Yeah.
I love that. That was such a great idea. I have spoken a lot with the people in Boston, the Age Strong, and I love the initiative that they're making and trying to change that. And so we are kind of taking that approach with some of our government officials in Middle Tennessee to kind of come on board. And there's a lot of hesitancy there, but to kind of come on board. So we're really working towards that and really want to, hopefully within the next 2 to 3 years, change some of that narrative.
Yeah. How do you feel like the paternalism comes, the sense that, it's pat folks on the head and make sure they're okay?
Yes.
Does that come up in your work? It must come up every day.
It comes up a lot in our work, and a lot of the phone calls we get might be from adult children, and some of you may be adult children caregiving, or some of you, your adult children to do this. The adult children want to make all the decisions for them and not with them. And we really encourage folks as they call us to, what does that older adult want? And I deal with that with my own mother and mother-in-law as caregiving. Like, what do you want? Tell me how you want to handle this, versus I find my siblings being, just tell her what to do and we're going to make her do it. So I think there's a lot of that, like, let's just push them to the side, we're going to make a decision for them, whereas they are still very capable of making a decision for themselves.
Overall, why do you think changing the attitudes matters, right? If we could just, not to individuals, but as a society, if we could just kind of put the right policies in place and leave it at that, like, why do you think the attitudes matter?
I think a lot of times people's attitudes are based on who they know. So like, if your grandparents were the kind you put in the corner and everybody ignored, or the ones that, I know older adults that during the pandemic, when they were isolated and alone, one learned to play mahjong on the computer. One who is Jewish did Torah classes for younger students in the Jewish community. So I feel like if we continue, we've got to get all of us buy-in. And if for our younger people, especially children, because my son goes, oh, you're spending the day with your old people today? You really love your old people, Mom. So it's to fight that continuous battle, because if we can get the younger generation to believe in what we believe in, then this will go away, and it will be a natural progression that older adults are a valued part of our community.
Absolutely. All right, well, I've got one reframing homework assignment. At least get them to say older. I know. Yeah, get to older rather than old.
Yes, and I find in myself, I really am trying to make sure I say the reframing, and as I age and want to age well myself.
Yeah. All right, I think we're supposed to open up for questions now, but before that, is there anything else you wanted to make sure you
I just hope, kind of how Julie ended on, that you tell the story that you go back from today and share, especially those of you from the St. Clair Senior Center. I hope to come visit you soon. But share with your friends and your neighbors who weren't here today just about what you've learned and how you guys can work to change the dynamic in your own families, in your community, and with your friends who weren't able to be here today. I think that's hopefully, I hope what you guys will leave with, and know that there are resources to help you in the community.
Yeah, absolutely. And you can do that in an individual level, like just, in your everyday conversations. And also, I think on the Reframing Aging Initiative website, there are ways to become a trainer in this and really kind of have an encore career in it. So I encourage everybody to check that out. Deborah, are you playing Oprah now? Are you going to take questions from
Sorry. Yes, so we have a roaming microphone, and Dr. Grubbs is here too, so I can hand it off to him. So yes, we have a question right up here.
So as we're trying to reframe how important older adults are, have we thought at the state level, working with the Department of Labor because of the shortage we have in labor, I heard one of them speak, and the number of children graduating high school and college is not enough to meet our needs in the state of Tennessee. But if we could reframe it to, we have high school, college, and what about our seniors that still want to give and do things? So how do we open that narrative?
And those are conversations that are being held at the state level and encouraging. It's to get the employers to buy in that these older people can still do the work and still want to do that. My mother is 80 years old and still goes to work every day because she enjoys what she does and she brings value to she works for a pediatric dentist and holds the hands of the special needs children when they get their teeth cleaned, and she calms them. But she brings value to them as an employee. So I really feel like it's going to be a change in that mindset, and there are conversations at the state level to say, and as we look at all the retired teachers, as we need students to learn to read who can't, maybe are in like grade level below, could we utilize some of these retired teachers? So it's going to be to change the mindset of the employers to do that. And I think I see a hand way in the back.
Way in the back. I'm glad I didn't do my exercise this morning because I'm going to get it here. Can you stand up, please? Thank you.
Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here. I have a comment. I work for a Mid-Commonwealth Community Action Agency, and we have a lot of seniors. And the problems that we have in Murfreesboro is transportation. The Mid-Cumberland and the National Council on Aging. A lot of people want to work, but they say they don't have job training. It's just a host. They're not paying them enough. And we have a lot of people who wants to get out instead of being in a home. And transportation and job in Murfreesboro is crazy. So how can we help? Because seniors older people comes to us and ask us, well, how can I get some training? I don't want to be at home. And when I send them places, they don't help. So how can we be a community to help the older seniors in Redford County?
I don't know that much about the local county situation, but I will say that in terms of what we've seen nationally, in terms of what shifts employers' attitudes, is an explicit anti-ageism campaign, right? Really go systematically, employer to employer, Chamber of Commerce, and showing them the data that, that actually older employees nationally, when they're on the job, they are rated as among the most competent, most valuable, most knowledgeable, and it really is stereotypes that stop people from seeing the value when they are at the point of hiring, right? So if older folks are in the job, the data shows that employers find them quite helpful. When you're on the job market, it's seen as a risk. And so I think, whoever are the folks locally who can start to carry that message to the right folks, it can only help.
I'd like to make the suggestion of working with the St. Clair Center and the public library to have classes, and I know people don't want to hear about people from Nashville, but the Nashville Public Library has a digital literacy program where they are specifically teaching older adults computer skills that they can use personally or to help them get a job. So possibly a relationship there could be developed, and programming with the local library and maybe the St. Clair Center. Transportation is an issue nationwide. In Nashville, we have the Council on Aging, now AgeWell, started a nonprofit called Senior Ride Nashville, where it's a volunteer-based transportation system. And Sumner County and Wilson County have also started these programs. So I would encourage you guys maybe to talk to some of your local officials or the Positive Aging Consortium that maybe some kind of program could be developed in Murfreesboro. So if someone wanted to go to work, someone could possibly, a volunteer, drop them at work. It's going to take some creative ways because the public transportation is not necessarily the best answer and the best routes for everyone. So those would be my suggestions locally of things to do or to try to create those relationships. I hope that helped.
And Paula brought on the table a directory of services that AgeWell Middle Tennessee puts together, I think, every year. And transportation, I'm sure, is one of those in there. So I just encourage you to take those with you too when you're looking for services. We have time for one more question, and then we're going to move on.
This may be a little different. I am very much, and it bothers me and it angers me when I see the commercials where they say only old people fall. That is a disservice to the young people as well. I think that it is something that we need to work on to promote the idea that falling does not know age. Falling is something that can happen to any one of us. And I am tired of looking at those commercials because that prevents people from buying. If you live alone, you should have something that somebody can come and help you. And I don't know how to go about it, but those commercials are not good for anybody.
Yes.
Not the old, not the young. Because we make it to where a young person says, well, I'm not old then. I'm sorry. That person can fall.
Yeah.
And I am a nurse. And falling is one of the things that we know is killing a lot of our people.
Yes.
Because more falls, we happen to maybe, as we all grow older, we might fall. But young people do too. And they also suffer extreme consequences. Yeah. So do you think that, what can we do about changing that?
Yeah.
And really the safety is what we should concentrate on, the safety.
Yes. I'm so glad you brought that up. So often we have these narratives that say, this particular health risk is more of a risk in later life. And statistically, that might be true, but it's not, as you say, it's not helpful, right?
No.
And so what we've been working with the CDC to do is to, in their injury center, to focus on what are the underlying causes of falls, their flexibility and balance and trip hazards, right?
Yes.
And so if we focus on that, if we focus on, say, for instance, flexibility being a driver of falls, that gives people a sense of, there's something we can do about it, right? Whereas they say, well, as you get older, you just get less flexible. What are you supposed to do? Stop time, right? People are very fatalistic about it. Whereas you say lack of flexibility and lack of balance, well, then people say, okay, well, let's get some stretching going on. Let's have a balance program. If you focus on trip hazards, not just, that you are isolated and your house has not been well maintained, but all of the floods we're having, all of the tornadoes as weather gets more extreme, that's creating those sorts of hazards as we don't have policies in place to inspect rental housing that families with young children are in. That's creating those things. So the idea is to associate the risk with the process, not so much people. And often we focus on particular groups that are at risk because we think it will garner sympathy. Okay, well, if we just say this is a problem for little old granny, people will want to, make a difference. No, they won't. And so, we can't rely on that sense of sympathy to drive policy. So I'm really glad you brought that up.
Well, I just think it's very important, and not only for us. I mean, it is for any age.
Absolutely.
Any age. Yeah. And I am an advocate for the people.
Yeah.
Not just us. And then if you want to be on balance, come to the senior center. Yeah. St. Clair Senior Center is a marvelous place to go.